episode number 129 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Meirav Zur. Meirav is a performer, writer, educator, and producer. Her most recent production and first solo show, Inconceivable, the totally true one-woman semi-fertile Quasi musical, is essentially her own true fertility experiences told through humor. This award-winning show has been performed on international stages large and small, aiming at smashing the taboo of infertility through laughter. So welcome to the podcast, Meirav.
Thank you so much for having me.
So can you share your background and how, well, first of all, you use your humor beautifully, and also how you were inspired to implement it towards fertility?
Sure. So I've been in theater for years. That's my professional background. And I was just creating and writing and performing and all things theater. Nothing that was my personal stories or anything like that. I never went into it. And then one time when, this was all happening, of course, while in parallel, I was going through personally my fertility journey, if you want to call it, even though that title is so, the title it makes it sound so nice and adventurous, but
it does, doesn't
but
it?
It's anything but, right?
Yeah.
So that's, it was happening in parallel. And then at some point, and this whole time, we didn't talk about it with anyone, mainly at my insisting, because my husband wanted to, and I said, no, we can't, who are we going to talk to? No one's going to, I don't want to tell anybody, no one should know, because of all the emotions involved. And then at some point, just a few years ago, I had another miscarriage, and it was like it was a surprise natural pregnancy. This whole time it was, we were dealing with unexplained infertility. So it was like, yay, we have no idea what's going on and what. So we found out that I was pregnant very late into the pregnancy, because I was like, we're not doing the fertility thing anymore, and I can't get pregnant. So like, I don't know why I haven't missed my period, and I haven't, gotten my period, and why have, and then I checked in and I was like, what, I'm pregnant. And we were like elated. And then that same week, it was already, in terms of the pregnancy, it was already time to start getting, all the regular tests. And then we found out that there was no heartbeat. So it was like all within like horrible. A couple of weeks. It was just like, thanks. But it was just like this weird, horrible roller coaster. And then I said, okay, maybe it's time, like, I talked about it with someone, and like, my friends didn't really know what was going on, and I was all like weird about it. And so then I just, one night I invited all my friends over, and I said, I'm just going to tell them, and I'm going to tell them all at once, and I'm going to get it over with.
Get it over with.
And the only way, yes. And then they'll know, and then it'll be fine, and they can go home and whatever. But the only way I could do it was through humor, because I was like, if I just sit there and tell them the story, I'm just going to bawl and it'll be crazy. And so that's what I did. I invited them to an evening. They had no clue what they were coming to, but they came. Yeah. And I sat there. I had everything written out because I was so nervous. Literally sat and clenched the papers and read everything from there. But I did do it through characters and silly songs and things like that. And then I was done. And I said, okay, here's the door, everybody. Bye. Thank you for coming. And they all stayed, and they were just like, because they started talking about, like, it started bringing up conversation. And that got me interested in the possibility of that as like theater, because I didn't even think it would go in that direction. And they all said, no, of course you have to turn it into one of your shows. It has to be something. It has to be on stage. And I said, but who would watch it? Like, who would want to see that? No one, but me, and maybe, you go through this. Like, I didn't even know that it was something that was really resonating with so many people, because everyone in that room, they're all women, and everyone either experienced something similar or knew someone that experienced something similar but didn't really know all the details. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like this, it warped into this thing, and then and that's how it started, and I created a full-on show. It took me about a year to fully develop it. And then I premiered it, and I also thought it was going to be a one night show, and I was fine
Mm-hmm.
with that. I was like, okay, fine. I'm just gonna show myself I can do it. And that also kind of, you know, all these people that I didn't know came up to me afterwards, and they were like, our daughter's been going through something like this, and we had no clue. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
wow.
And
That's amazing.
yeah, my sister has done, IVF, but I didn't really know what that was, like all this stuff. And I said, okay, now I have to keep doing this, because
Yeah.
apparently it's like, because of the humor was kind of, it wasn't this like lecture that people didn't really want to hear. It was, I set it up in like a story, but it's like, with humor, it kind of lend itself to breaking the ice.
Yeah.
And so that's how it started.
Well, because there's so many different difficult things to express about the whole challenges and like the whole journey. I guess I'm trying
Yep.
to use a different word, but
Yeah, yeah,
that's the
yeah.
only
The
thing that
whole
comes to my
thing, the
mind.
whole shebang.
The whole
Yep,
shebang. So you
the whole
basically,
shebang.
I mean, there's so many different aspects to it, and some of them are very raw. Some of them just
Yep,
don't lend themselves to being something that you want to like talk about. But if you infuse humor in it, I feel like that bridges in a much easier way to be able to
yep,
express just how tough it is and kind of all the details that you deal with like injections and
yep.
bloating and just like everything.
Everything, and it's so much, and it's so encompassing, and um, you know, kind of like demanding of whoever's involved, that it's, you get into this little, I call it like a little fertility bubble. You're like in this
Yeah.
thing, um and it's pretty crazy, and yet at the same time so surreal. So it's funny. It could be really really funny. I mean, it's awful, the thing itself, obviously
Yeah.
not, but when you have, humor is, also, and sometimes in retrospect, like there were times that I was going through this, obviously there was no humor involved, but some, yeah, like it was the only way that we could, like, get through that day or that hour or that weird, examination or whatever it
Yeah.
was. So
It's a
yeah,
tension release. It really is like such a
yeah,
therapeutic tool. I
yeah,
think it's kind of like a best kept secret. Not everybody thinks to use it because it's not funny. Like, the actual
right,
thing is not funny. But
right,
yet, having those moments really alleviates that pressure and that
yeah,
tension and gets you
yes.
through that moment.
Yes, and not only, in the like dry sense of it, but it's also scientifically proven. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're laughing, you got all that release of, like, all the endorphins and feel good hormones, and it
Yeah.
makes you feel like it's literally like a little hack.
Yep. It
So yeah.
is. It's a hack. So this must have been so cathartic for you. You were able to kind of release it
Yes.
or have at least like one way of releasing it, which was therapeutic.
Yeah, the again, that night with my friends was one thing, but then when it was a show, um, it was crazy in all its sense, because a premiere show that, the first time you're out there, and it's like my personal story. I'm not just like a character the whole time. And so that was, it had its challenges. But ever since then, every time I perform it, it's like I always say, I'm like, right before the show, I'm like, okay, seriously, I don't really have to do this. I don't really have to go out in front of,
Yeah.
and I get kind of like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But then after I do it, it's such it's kind of, I get that therapeutic feel also. It's a release for me. And I usually cry after, and everything. It's very draining, like the whole performance. But the thing that does it for me is afterwards I usually stick around, and some audience members usually find me and talk to me, and that just gets me motivated for the next one. Because
That's
I
amazing.
have, if it's like one person it affected, it helped, it made them see something different, that's everything.
It is.
So
And I find, when we get to express ourselves authentically in a position where we're able to reach a lot of people, we're going
yeah,
to, if it's authentic, if it's aligned, if it's our truth, and even when it's
yeah,
painful, especially, somebody out there and many somebodies are going to be touched by it because it's this human
yeah,
experience that we all share. And so being able to be authentic and to be raw is actually very difficult and challenging, and it takes a lot of courage. Really, it takes a lot of courage.
yeah,
But then afterwards,
yeah.
it's worth it.
It's totally worth it. It's just, something like this, especially because it's not only because it's, something that many people deal with and, are ashamed to speak about, but it's also mind-boggling how today in 2021, it's still so taboo. It's still
Hmm.
so taboo.
Yeah.
Even though you have this growing community online,
Hmm.
of people going through it, and I think there is more awareness and a bit more general knowledge about it, I still think it's still taboo. I mean, there are women, just go down to basics. There are women still at the workplace hiding their pads or tampons when they go to the bathroom. I mean, that
Yeah.
that
I
says
know.
something right
It's
there.
crazy.
So
It's true.
yeah, yeah. So definitely something like infertility. So yeah, it's high time that it's become a bit, more people are in the know about at least what goes on. So at the very least, they could be a bit more sensitive and aware of what
Hmm.
is definitely going on with at least one person they know, statistically speaking.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So what are the different topics that you address during a show?
the show itself is basically me telling my fertility story. So
Hmm.
I basically adjust from the beginning of my like sex education, which was through childhood and, the lovely sex ed classes in school,
Yes,
which
that are
are always
so
taught
accurate,
by,
right? They're so
they're
accurate.
they're
I'm
so
saying it
accurate and at the
sarcastically.
same time completely awkward, because almost
Yeah,
always it's your gym coach teaching it and they don't want to
right.
do it, but they're forced to do it.
That's right.
And then, and you learn all this stuff, which is mainly don't do it because you're going to get pregnant right when you just like glide next to a person.
Right.
And then, you know, so that's what you're left with. How do I keep myself from getting pregnant accidentally by walking next to the opposite sex? And then, you go into the time when you are actually trying, and then you're finding out that it's not quite like that, and there was some misinformation there, and then I go into everything that we went through that whole time, whether it's gynecological examinations and all that wonderful stuff, and and IUIs and IVF, and I talk about all of it, and and the emotions that go with it. But the whole story is I'm not there standing telling the story. I go from like telling it like me, and then I pop in and out of characters, and then I
Hmm.
use some songs and a lot of props, and yeah, that's it's
That's great.
basically the only
I
way I
think it's
figured out
awesome.
how to do it.
That's great.
Yeah,
It's really cool. So you had mentioned you talked about fertility comedy not being non PC.
yeah,
And it's just kind of raw. This is exactly what it is.
yes. That is it. It's this topic is very sensitive, and so when you put a comedic spin, um, the immediate reaction is like, wait, am I is oh, should we be laughing at that? Well, I don't think we
Yeah.
should be laughing at that, and it's not that, we're the comedy is saying laugh at people who are dealing with this, not at
Hmm.
all. The comedy is saying this is the truth, it's happening, we should talk about it more and not, hide or dance around it.
Right.
Um, So yeah, that's it's a way. I say it's kind of like people with infertility have, they when they're in it, they can't really explain it. And the people that are outside of it, outside of infertility, can't really understand it. So the comedy kind of bridges that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I find happens a lot, just in speaking to my patients and my clients, like, is that people around them, there's almost a stigma, like people around them don't know how to approach them. They get really uncomfortable because they don't
Totally.
understand it. And then they say
Right.
stupid, insensitive things because they're so
Right.
nervous and they don't
Right.
know what to say. They don't know how to
And
talk about it.
also, yeah, and also ignorant, not at their fault.
Exactly. They just don't know better.
They just don't know, and they don't know what it means, or they know a little bit and then they assume the
Hmm.
rest.
Right.
And it's just,
They fill in the blanks.
which is just as bad. Yeah, they fill in the blanks, and that's, and and then you don't want to go into it because there's also this like thing, even within, the infertility community. Sometimes there's this kind of like sense of competition, like, well, I don't know if I can say that I'm truly, affected by infertility because, Susie has gone through, two rounds of IVF and I've only done one IUI or something like that,
Hmm.
or,
I've heard that
she's
before.
gone
Yeah.
through surrogacy and I have, so, but it's really not like that. Like, people need to understand it's not a competition. We're not in the like fertile Olympics here. We are doing what we can
Hmm.
in our own lane, and everybody's story and circumstances are different. So
Right. That's true.
uh,
You also talk about fertility OCD. I understand it from my perspective. Talk about that and how it can really impact. I mean, because it's very easy to have that like in the journey because you're getting all this information thrown at you like of what you need to do, and you're like, I'll do anything, just give it to me, I'll do anything. And then sometimes people get really hard on themselves.
it's not just that. It kind of like, you have a combination, a lethal combination of both the strong will of someone wanting, I want to have children, added to that, um, whatever it takes, and whatever protocols you're using, maybe all the protocols,
Yeah.
the conventional one, add the unconventional one, and all that makes, like, even whether you want to or not, you become like totally OCD because you're like, okay, so I have scheduled sex on here, 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 and then I have to have my, my meeting with the doctor, and then I do this, and I take my vitamins, and I take my this, and I have my massage, and then I go
Mm-hmm.
to my exercise, and you like, it becomes everything,
Mm-hmm.
and it's totally OCD. And then it's like, okay, so hold on a minute, that also means that I can't really meet with this and this friend on that day because I might miss my, whatever it is I'm missing, my, meditation moment. I don't know, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
then, and soon enough, you start to kind of weed yourself out from a lot of social confrontations, if you will, or any type of social interaction, and it becomes like horrible. Really, I can't really
Yeah.
describe it otherwise.
Because the thing
It's
is,
really, yeah,
yeah, you almost don't, you almost feel like if you don't do that, you're doing something wrong. And that's what you're told to
obviously, and
do.
everything, yeah, and everything when it goes wrong, like, okay, another month you got your period. Oh, it must have been because I did the meditation twice and not three times, and I took only, the whatever grass pills and not the wheat and grass pills, whatever.
Right.
And then it really, it gets in your head.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And that's the thing. So I've noticed when I first started specializing in fertility, I was like doing all my research and then telling my patients everything that I've, because I was like all excited. I'm like, this does this. And I realized and I'd see the look on their face and I was like, oh, I'm overwhelming them, aren't I? And it's something all of us learn in the beginning of our careers,
Right.
how to deliver in a way that with ease. And then I was like, whoa, I gotta stop this. This is too much pressure. So So I
Yeah.
started realizing, no, you just ease them into it. There's no pressure. If they skip this or that, who cares? It's better to have a good mindset, like feel good and happy, and less pressure than to have to do everything perfect. And then I realized between what we teach them about diet, exercise, and then they get this information too, like a different set of rules from their doctors. And it's just, it
Right.
can drive a person crazy.
Yes. And what you said is such a good point, because it's, you know, you are really overwhelmed with all this information, and yet you want to do it all because you really feel like you need to,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're not doing it correctly and you won't, pass the test or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And and it's just, it's really, it really messes with any normal person like you. And and this has to also be mentioned. Usually this involves some sort of team, whether it's, a couple, um, of any, any sort of couple. Um, and it requires you to be really strong individually and also as a team,
Mm-hmm.
because this can rip you apart within
It's
seconds,
true.
because it's so much. And I think people underestimate that, or they just don't know what they're going into. And it's like, oh, guess what? You have kind of a problem getting pregnant, so you're just going to go through, art or whatever it is, and it's okay. And you're just like going along with it, like, okay, I was told I had to do this, so I do it. You don't, I mean, there's so much around it, the um relationships, mental health is huge,
Yeah, it
and
is.
physical well-being and everything, and it's dismissed so quickly and so easily, unfortunately, that I think people going into it need to know, listen, it's not just the scheduling and the,
Right.
exorbitant amount of stuff you have to, put in you, and other people will put in and out of you. it's
Yeah.
it's it's everything. It's like, it's your mind and your relationship, and you have to, really be a team player in the sense of your team, that personal team. It has to be, all in.
Absolutely. And all couples, you know, all couples perceive things differently and go through challenges differently. So whether it's same
Yep.
sex, opposite sex, it doesn't matter. Everybody has a different way of dealing with emotions and processing emotions. And when you're dealing with something that's so traumatic, one person might want to shut down and the other person might need to talk, and everybody has their different way of doing it. So that's where I've seen the biggest challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's, I don't know how it is with your clients, but sometimes I know that, when I was trying out my fair share of, of specialists, it was just like, okay, I'm going to you because you're going to fix me. You're going to give me the little, that little pill or that little, whatever slip of paper that says the solution to everything. And then
Yeah.
I go and it'll all be fine. And it's really not like that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, some people. Not, thank God, I have a lot of people that I think by the time they get to me, they realize everything takes time, and especially with Chinese
Yeah.
medicine. I mean, we're talking,
Yeah.
we're on nature's cycle. Nature doesn't hurry, and we're on nature's cycle.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different ball game. So in some senses, I actually get a lot of people feeling relief. Like, oh my God, you could take care of this. You did the research. I don't have to think for a little bit. And that's ultimately what
Yeah.
my goal is, to get them to the point where they can let go a little bit, so that they don't have to hold it all in their
Yeah.
shoulders.
Yeah. It's super important because it's a lot to hold on. And it's,
Oh, big
and
time.
people, and yeah, and I have to also, mention, especially in secondary infertility, not only are you keeping a brave face for, the people outside, and then you could just do
Yeah.
what you want when you're at home, you also have to keep on brave face because you have
Yep.
kids that are, needing you normal.
Yeah.
And that is
And you don't get as much
very, very
sleep, and you don't
challenging.
have enough time, like for sex. I mean, there's so many
Right.
different things that, so many
Right.
different parts to it, and so and like you said, it doesn't matter if you've had a kid, didn't have a kid, or what it looks like. Everybody's struggling in their own way, in their own right, and there is no competition when it comes to fertility challenges.
Yeah, although I have to say that since I started the show, the biggest best thing was being able to learn so much about people. And really at every show I learn yet a new story of someone, and through social media I've gotten to know all these people that have all clue no clue about what's going on, and like they're the little, the stories are just amazing. And then it just leads me to understand, I quickly understood, wow, everybody has their issues,
Mm-hmm.
infertility or not. Everybody has issues
True.
with something. They
Yeah.
all got baggage, and that's how I start my show. I'm saying, we all got baggage,
Right.
and it's okay. And,
Yeah.
nobody's perfect. Nobody has it figured out, and nobody, and that's very important because, it's easy to forget that and be like, oh, but I have my timeline and I have my thing, and like the clock seems to always be ticking, and
Mm-hmm.
society also puts a little bit of burden on that. So it's yeah, it's a challenge.
Well, it's kind of liberating to realize that truth that everybody has their baggage and everybody's got their stuff
Yeah,
because then you don't feel so alone. And it may not look
right,
exactly like yours, but it's true. Everybody's going through some kind of struggle at one point or another in
yep,
their life. I mean, we all have
right,
seasons, right? But
right,
yeah, that it's liberating to think about because whenever you go through anything like that, or even a diagnosis or whatever, like I mean, it's a diagnosis, which I don't always think is accurate based on my experience with working with people. Sometimes people get like these diagnoses that are not true, and they overcome it
right,
naturally. They're told they're not. So I kind of that's a whole other topic, but yeah, you hear those things, and at the time, you feel like your whole world's falling apart, and you feel like nobody else can understand, which is why it's so
yep,
great that you're doing this because people can relate to it and feel like, oh my God, I'm not alone in this. This isn't,
yeah,
and you doing it too is actually proving to you that you're not alone because you're having people approach you
right,
and connecting with
right.
other people.
And
So it's healing.
it's very healing. It's it's just it's such a powerful force when you get that connection. And then once you have a connection with one person, it's like, wow, that means I'm also connected to, all these other people. And when you feel that with other people, it's amazing. It's beyond, it's like you have this like underlining understanding, which is also, it's kind of like what I love about theater, when it makes people kind of think about stuff, and not just entertainment,
Yeah.
but it makes you kind of think a little bit different, makes you maybe start a conversation with somebody. And then with this on top of that, it's the whole like therapy about it. So and you get a few laughs. It's like, it really is a powerful thing.
Yeah, for sure. And so your show, is it part improv or is it always kind of your story? How does it
It's
work?
Well, it's scripted. I scripted it, and of course, the songs and everything. Those are all they were written. I wrote. I created the props. I did everything
Hmm.
because it was like, I gotta make the show, so I'm gonna do it myself. But there are parts in there that are improvised, and there's also audience interaction,
Oh, that's
which
great.
also gets the audience to feel very awkward for a minute. But I love it because I'm like, now you're
It's
on the
fun for you.
spot. I'm putting you on the spot. But yeah, but it's no, it's a lot of fun, and then it also gets people into it because it's like, because we're all part of it, and
Right.
that's also what I'm trying to show. It's like we're all connected to this thing, whether you've experienced it or not. It's statistically speaking, that's how it is. Somebody, even if you don't know.
Right. It's true. It's true. You may not even know that they're going through it. It might be in private.
Right, right.
So for people who want to check out your show, like, is it some of it's in virtual, right?
Well,
Now.
I have bits of it that I've edited from a recorded performance,
Mm-hmm.
and that's on my YouTube page and on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I put those on periodically,
Mm-hmm.
and on Instagram I'm also a bit more active because it's just easier for me, and I put on a lot of other stuff related to the show, comedy related to it that is not all necessarily in the show, because I only, there's only so much you can, put in an hour or so performance. But yeah, so that's all over there. They could watch that. And the show, obviously, until last year, was happening live all over. I performed it in different countries and cities and everything. And right when I was about to gear for a US and UK tour, everything shut down,
it's crazy.
As it happened. Yeah. So right now it's not happening live in stages. I'm hoping that'll get back to how it was. So meanwhile, I'm hosting every now and then like these watch parties where we get to watch the full show online, the recorded version, and then we get to interact and talk about it and do a Q&A and everything.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah,
and how
everyone
can people find that?
Connect with me online. So easiest to find me on social media. I'm at Inconceivable Show in one word. And that's for Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And my Twitter is Inconceivable Sh. It's just Inconceivable SH, because it didn't let me do the whole thing.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's and also on TikTok I'm Inconceivable Show. So yeah, that's mainly it, and everything else they can find there. Everything is available there, all the websites and links to everything. So
awesome. So I'm going to have those links on the episode notes, so if people want to go, they can find it there.
Oh, great.
Do you have a website as well?
Yes, it's it's long. I can send you the link.
Okay, send me the link and I'll put it in the website notes, episode notes. So anybody who wants to look for them, they can find them right there. So this was a pleasure to speak with you. I was really excited to have you on the podcast. Haven't had this topic before, and I love it. I think it's great. It's so important on so many different levels. It really is. It's healing, and it's great for people to connect to. I mean, really, I think that, and it really works to take out the stigma.
Yeah, thank you. And I love what you're doing too. I often I've started to meet people through social media, and like you're one of the people that I saw, and I'm like, now, like, that would have been so helpful if I would have met her a few years ago.
Well, I'm here if you need anything. So
yeah, I'm glad. I'm really, really glad to have met you. Even now, I think, it's a pleasure to have spoken with you, and I'm sure we'll be able to collaborate in the future on many things.
Absolutely, for sure. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So while we're on the topic of humor, this is something that I've been excited to show and share on the show, something that I've been saving. In the beginning of the show, I was very nervous to speak. It was very hard for me to get a word out. It was definitely not in my nature. Over time, I got a lot more comfortable speaking. However, I did save some of my very, very awkward moments and mistakes or bloopers. So I basically created a little accumulation or a combination of all the bloopers and put them all together. And I want you guys to enjoy it because you will get some laughs from it. So here goes. That takes a hold of a registered dietitian nutritionist. Her hair is of 9. My next guest. Years later, she realized that the root cause of her. Years later, she realized that the root cause of her. Oh my God. Years later, she realized that the root cause of her. Years later, she realized that the root cause of her infertility was a food when I've spoken to, and so how do you go on into a deprivation? And I mean, on her speaking, and if you need it, offer, she's functional for, so before we get I'm almost, oh Lord, drawing heavily from the cure and believes that with and their mental as a result of his So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.